did everybody get a chance to read chapter 2 in A Place of Encounter?
Yep.
All right, so let's do just a brief check-in from that chapter. What questions do you have? What didn't make sense? Hush. What didn't make sense? What confused you? That kind of thing.
I just thought it was really, I felt like I learned a lot just reading it. Mm-hmm. And the different aspects of what's in the sanctuary and what the duplication or non-duplication of things.
Yeah.
I just found that very, very compelling, and I can see why we want to think through how we're going to use the sanctuary. Thank you. That's just, sorry.
I blocked that word for some reason too.
And I think coming from the Roman Catholic background, even as a kid, when I walk into high church, yes, it was beautiful and everything, but I always thought I didn't live in a rich neighborhood. It was a poor neighborhood, and I used to think that money could be used for the people, that I didn't need a building like that. I mean, do we like the comfort? Yes, I don't want to sit out there in the cold, but I like to be comfortable, but I just don't think we need all of that.
Yeah, we probably don't need the newest, latest, and greatest of everything. Pews that recline for you and help you get up. And
Well, now
wait.
Y'all were fine.
Add a couple of years to your. Well, a couple of.
Maybe we can get a few for the
Decades.
lazy boy when that happens.
Yeah, we'll leave 2 sections open for you to bring your recliners.
Okay.
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying, what both of you are saying, because, like I said, the church I was on internship at was an old church, and they had collected a lot of things over the years, including from Lutheran churches that were closing and stuff like that around them. And so there was just this, you couldn't focus in any one place because there was so much happening all around you. You had all these stained glass windows that had all these images in them, and then you had over here these new stained glass windows that didn't match the old ones but still were very pretty, and it was just like, even on top of over the pulpit there was a wooden octagon that hung down to reflect your voice before they had microphones.
Oh, yes.
And on top of it, it was held up by a ironwork Easter lily.
Oh.
Because that's the trumpet flower, the proclamation flower.
Right.
It just the chain was made out of little crosses and stuff. And
Wow.
one day I was doing a children's sermon and we started counting crosses and we gave up at like 38. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, when I went into Notre Dame up there in Montreal, we just all stopped in awe. I mean, so it's kind of a mixed feeling.
Well,
like the feeling.
There's a way to do it right and a way to do it wrong.
Right.
And you can burn people out on a symbol. I mean, if you have too much of it, it loses its meaning.
Well, even to their point about flowers on the altar, which has always been, because my family always put flowers on, that was one of their things. But reading that, well, why do you need 2? That one would suffice.
One grand one is better
Did
than.
we start doing that for
Yeah.
balance or something?
There's no telling. We started doing a lot of things for weird reasons
Yeah.
in the tradition of the church.
Well, I think they were doing it here.
Oh, I know here. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were, but why 2?
And there was always 2 here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at Messiah they had 2. In the chapel they had 2 sanctuary lights, the red candles,
2?
because the person who bought them bought 2 and gave them in memory of his wife, and so like it was a commandment of God that those would burn at all times and in all places. And 2 was how many was given, 2 was how many should remain lit at all times. It was,
Okay.
yeah.
Maybe there's the his and the her Holy Spirit. Be politically gender correct.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, they only need one.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, there's a lot to that, and I think we should be mindful of that because the sanctuary that we have, even before we had to vacate it, was a fairly simple sanctuary.
That's because we went through many choices when we were looking before we had this, and that we wanted something more simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you were here at the beginning, right?
Almost at the beginning, I did not go down to Alice Burney when they first started there. I would set up. But I didn't know what kind of a religion was meeting in the cafeteria because I was a snob, I guess. Before I started going to
You know that
church
Catholic
there.
in her. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've had to explain to people before that Lutherans are Christians, so.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was fine when I went out to Las Vegas and they were starting a new church out there. And we met in a hardware store. And I'd go and help my sister-in-law and brother had set up for services. They started about the time we did here.
I don't want to get too far into it without looking at the questions.
I know our sanctuary is, other than having the baptismal bathtub
Font.
behind the altar
Well,
in the choir, no, it was a bathtub. My grandfather
Oh.
literally built from stone
No, really?
the church that he built it, and it was a Church of Christ. So I mean, it had the same buttresses, the same cross, the whole, you know. And
Wow.
so when I came in here, I felt very comfortable. Of course, I was baptized a Methodist, and then I was rebaptized because somebody told me that you was only baptized once. So when I was going to join the Lutheran Church in LA, I went to talk to the pastor and I said, "Now, do I have to be baptized again?" And he went, "If I try to baptize you, the bishop is going to run me out of town." Okay.
yeah, we're not like the Baptists. The Baptists will baptize you as many times as it takes, and if you feel like you're running low, they'll dunk you again.
Well, it did not take the first time. Get the Catholic, then the Baptist. It evidently didn't take.
My
Well, the Catholic
daughter and her family, well, the little one was little. Her and her husband were Lutherans and brought up Lutherans and confirmed Lutherans and married in the Lutheran church. And then he started going to a Baptist church and was baptized. And I could not understand why he had to be baptized again. And then my daughter we were going together to church on Sunday, and then she was going again to the next service with her husband at the Baptist church, and little by little she started drifting more to the Baptist. And I was glad at least they were going as a family,
Yeah.
but it broke my heart when she told me she was going to be baptized. I
Again.
kept saying, "You don't need to be baptized again. You were baptized as an infant."
Lexi,
But she
See
said,
if that's
in order
the
to join the
landscape
church, I have to be baptized. So,
go out in the hall and see if the landscape people are out there.
Right there, I think.
No, that's one of them. There's 3.
No.
I think I heard them come
Here's.
in. I'm back here.
Well, look at me.
you've been working hard.
I look like I took a good profession, don't I?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
All right, let's take a look at some of the questions here. So, based on what you read and what well, let's do it this way. What were you brought up to believe the church was?
The people,
The people.
the
Yeah.
congregation.
You can have church anywhere.
I'm not sure.
Did you
I'm
have
not
church?
sure. I attended church. I even went to Sunday school. The nuns were not nice. So you can see how much I listened to them.
I mean, I think ideally we've always been taught that it's the people, right?
It should be.
But when you take away a church's building, people start making a lot of noise.
Yeah,
Really
I do
quick.
agree with that.
You think so?
I
Because
think
when we
you
met
need-
outside,
you need a
we
church,
liked it, didn't we?
But
Didn't
what
we like
makes the church is the people.
Yeah.
But you need a designated place.
It really
to worship.
depends on who the minister
Whether
or
it be a-
pastor or priest is too, because some of them think they are the.
The church.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I will agree with you on that.
Mhm.
I
I've
mean,
seen that.
when y'all were meeting outside, you could still see the church.
Mm-hmm.
You were still on the property.
Sure.
With us meeting back there in the fellowship hall, people could still walk through the church and they still have that touchstone. If that thing were to cave in today and we couldn't come back in the building and couldn't meet on the property for whatever reason, then people would get upset pretty
Which
quick.
I think they would stray a
Told
bit.
you, mommy's on
Well,
the
do you
And-
think their
kitchen.
priorities are wrong?
Go put it back.
Well, and some
'Cause
some
this-
people they need
The visual.
the belongings of the church, the things that go with the church, the music, the pews, the cross.
Well, those
Yeah.
are all things to consider.
Yes, you know, to go and sit in the cafeteria in a high school for a church service is,
It's
I
different.
don't know, it's not the same as going to a church building.
Building,
It
yeah.
has everything you associate with a church in a sanctuary. So
I
they're,
feel
they're
that-
both important,
Yeah,
but without the people, there'd be no church.
right.
I mean, that's one of the reasons that I worked hard to set that fellowship hall up as much church-like as
I
possible.
think that
agree,
made it
and that-
different.
And when you put the pews in there, it
changed
did.
it
It did
put
change the
cross
way
in front
thing-
of- over
exactly.
behind the altar.
I
Yeah.
feel
think
it
we
did
all
change.
felt
Had
that way
a
when
whole
we
different
walked in.
feeling
Yes.
when you walked in.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a good way of understanding it is that yes, the church is the people, and we can be church together anywhere. But there is also a more holistic understanding of the church. Excuse me. If your worship space that you have, wherever it happens to be, reflects who you are and reflects the priorities that we confess we believe in, then it's a more holistic thing where the church is the people, but it's also the building that they're using to focus their worship. It's also the message they're sending with that construction. It's everything all together. Okay. What a better way of looking at it for us personally is yes, we are the church, but what is most important is that we are a reflection of Christ. We are part of Christ's body, and so we carry Christ with us wherever we go. And so that is what people are encountering when they meet us out in the world, is Christ crucified and risen. You know, that piece of us that's always united with Christ. Does that make sense?
I think it pointed it out in that chapter. I read it somewhere there where to look upon one another.
Yeah.
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 I hadn't thought about looking at
Yeah.
a person that way.
He used
But you
the
can't tell.
he used the example of the Benedictine monastery he went to, and where they bowed first to the altar and then
And then to each other, yes.
which is that's a powerful symbolism that I'd never thought about.
Mm-hmm.
So, So we pretty much agree that it's primarily people, but the building has an importance. It's not a be-all, end-all, but it has an importance, right?
I think it's a familiarity too.
Yeah.
Of you know the people you're coming to see, but there's the comfort in knowing you're going to a church that you're every Sunday you
Yeah,
see the
you're
same
So
familiar.
that
thing.
you feel
hear-
at home.
Well, there's
yeah,
Yeah.
And
Well, it's another like family gathering.
gathering,
You-
right?
It's a different
Yeah.
family, but people you only see.
Exactly.
well,
certain
and
times.
every church has its own unique characteristics. So, like, even the way that we do communion differs from the way that St. Michael does communion. So, excuse me, when we had the guest pastor last week, I had to write all that out so that she would know what to expect, because here we go forward by the center aisle and then split to go down the different directions. St. Michael, everybody goes up and then goes down one side aisle and goes back to wherever they need to go. And it's just things like that. When I went from my home church in Georgetown and got assigned to a teaching parish up in Lexington, Pisgah, they had 2 worship services, which I had never been in a church that had multiple worship services. The 8:30 service was a contemporary-ish service. They had people who played guitars, but they also used the piano, and sometimes the organist would just decide this needs organ, and he'd jump on the organ, and you would be able to hear the guitars or the drums or anything else, but they'd be trying. And it was a different type of service, even though it kind of followed along the liturgy path. And the first time I went, I had to be at that service. I was like, I don't know about all this. Seems like it wouldn't hurt y'all to pick up a hymn, though.
I agree.
It is
with that.
different.
Yeah, and then the 11:15 service was the traditional service, and the major difference between the two was the energy level. Okay, the 8:30 service was a packed service. Lots of young kids, lots of stuff happening. The 11:15 service, though it was my favorite, was kind of a snooze fest. You went from having a sanctuary of 112 people in there to people, maybe 40. And it was just like, it was also frustrating because you felt like almost as if the 8:30 service ended up being your practice run. And so 11:15, you had it down.
And you're ready to
but
go.
there was a lot less people to hear about it. So there is a familiarity with being able to come to the same church over and over again and knowing the traditions, knowing the customs, and there is a certain fear anytime you go into any other place because now you don't want to make the wrong move or do the wrong thing. And
Right.
Sit in
You
somebody's
sit or
pew.
stand.
and some church, that's why we've worked on the bulletin the way we have
Right.
to make it a little bit more accessible without pressuring people to participate fully at first. If you look in the front of the bulletin, it says this is for people who aren't able to stand up and sit down, but it's also for people who don't want to. That if you're not able to stand up when everybody stands up, you're still participating fully in the worship service. Because I don't want anybody to be like, oh God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Because I've been there. I know what it's like. And it's even pastors deal with it. Because the first time I came over here, I had no idea what to expect from the way y'all had been doing things. And I encountered things like psalm hymns and the peace being at the very beginning of the service. And it was like, okay, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right.
I always thought that's where it was supposed to be.
The peace has traditionally always come right before you start the meal liturgy, because the point of the peace was not to go around and say hello to everybody. It was to seek out people in the congregation who you were in a dispute with and make peace with them before you went to the altar together.
Well, I'm glad. Now I know what to do.
When you did, because when you
I didn't know that.
didn't do that, you were going to the altar sitting still.
Okay.
Wow.
Some churches moved it to the front of the
There's
service
something.
to provide a convenient way for the pastor to get back to the back of the congregation after doing the
Right.
confession so they could do the procession. But I've always found that if I walk down the side aisle and then come back up, I don't miss anything. Everything's fine. So
Okay.
Learn something.
I thought it was, yeah, it was greet everybody. Hey, how you doing? You have a good week?
Or what about those churches that everybody gets out of the pew and goes and hugs everybody?
That's-
Oh, we
that's-
used
to.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
kind
that
of
was
church.
getting to be
That's
the
kind
kind
of
of-
confusing. I mean, it was people were meandering around.
Trying
Yeah.
to get them back.
Used to take,
Yeah.
used to take.
Well,
quite a
that's
while.
when we had Mary Ellen or whoever would start
Yeah.
to play.
And most
Yeah.
organists know to do that to rein people back in because
Yeah.
otherwise they start getting. I mean, you'll have people,
They would
and
go
I've
too
had
far.
I've had to tell people before, people who are visiting, you know, because everybody starts moving around and they're like, all right, church is over. They start heading for the door. It's like church isn't over yet. Come on, it's all right. Come
Well,
on.
that was
Come
also
on.
a time we used when there were people that came in that we didn't know that we would go over and
Right.
would talk
Yeah,
to them. So
and
that
and
was,
so some contact like that is a good thing, right? But too much can scare
Scare
people.
someone.
Like I've had to talk to him over at St. Michael before because even during COVID, they would mob a visitor. They would just like, we're so happy to see you. And the message isn't welcome to our church. The message is we need you. Come here, save us now.
Right. We need your body.
Yeah. And it's like, y'all, you're starting to scare people. Everybody stay in your pew. Thank you.
Yes.
well, we did have a
We did have a
whatever-
visitor, but she got up and she leaned over to me and she said, I just need to leave. And I said, she said, I'm not taking communion. Hi.
Hello.
Hey.
Oh,
Hey.
Hello.
she's ignoring.
Mom!
Get up all your stuff. Especially the stuff you've left around my office. Our supper stuff is in the fridge, along with her Lunchable, and she has macaroni in the freezer. Give me the
Did
milk.
you get all that?
Good Lord. Alexis, hey, get your stuff. I'm so happy to see you.
Thank you for your paper.
Yes.
Yes.
For our notes. Thank you.
Bring it home.
Bye.
Bye. You have a good day at school tomorrow. Can you get by? Can't
Yes,
get in
have fun.
anymore.
Learn lots.
Make sure you get all your homework stuff out of my office too.
Study hard on your math.
Yeah,
So,
so,
should they
so
get
our
up?
visitor said, I'm not going to receive communion. I said, well, you don't have to leave. You come up for a blessing. No, I just need to leave.
Yeah.
I mean,
she
she
left
was
so abruptly. I didn't know what
Gone.
happened.
But she did sign the guest book. So I was going to send her like a little card and just thank her for coming.
Yeah, that's
Well,
Are you okay with that?
Did you tell what Lillian said that? No, Lillian said that a friend of hers said that was it Lillian that said she'd be more comfortable maybe coming to Lutheran Church
Yes.
Baptist.
Yeah.
And I thought,
But she's been doing a lot of research, and she felt like this is where she wanted to come. But boy, she beat feet fast.
well, yeah, and
Little, yeah.
and our visiting pastor was
She wanted all this for supper? She wanted all this for supper?
well, it's not all that. The only thing in there is chicken nuggets.
Oh, alright.
Bye.
Yeah. So I was excited that she was there, but
Well, you also have to remember that, like, communion in the Baptist church is different than communion in
Right.
the Lutheran church. The Baptists don't commune very often. So it can be a little unnerving for somebody who's not used to weekly communion to come into a situation where it's so routine for us.
Right.
So
I
Yeah.
think they only do it holy days or something.
yeah, some
think
Baptist
they
church
do
only do
it-
it twice a year.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
I think when my daughter goes, it's I think
And
they
I
do
bet
it
that
each-
could
yeah,
be,
in
'cause
the first
she's
of the
been
year
on.
and like the middle of the year.
Yeah. And then, like, there's some Pentecostal holiness churches that'll only do it once a year because they say if you do it more often, you cheapen it. And it's like, no, Jesus said, do this as
Listen,
often as you remember me.
right.
It's like literally in the Bible. When I was working for Advance and I was an assistant manager, my store manager was a deacon in the Pentecostal holiness church. And we would have conversations all the time, and he'd be like, I just want y'all to go by the Bible. I'm like, I just want you to go by the Bible too. It says, this is my body, this is my blood. It don't say remembrance of nothing. Well, he doesn't actually mean, so that's the one place Jesus doesn't actually mean what he's saying. It's just in that one. I didn't see the heading that told me Jesus doesn't mean this.
Those must be lively conversations.
So,
Yeah, but I looked when I came in, she did sign the guest book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will, she was very talkative and before church started, but anyway,
Yeah.
disappointed. But I'll send her a card.
So we've got about 25 minutes left because we want to end at 6:30 so that
That's your sweet blood.
there aren't many left because I cleaned out their home.
Oh, okay.
I got up there on the ladder that your husband got and cleaned out the gutter yesterday. So when you go outside and you see all those dark colored leaves all around the bushes at the front door, that's all the stuff I shoveled out of there. Yeah, it was the gutter is really deep. Okay, it's probably that deep at
Oh, wow.
least. Okay, it's about that wide across and at least that deep. And it was full almost to the top. And so I started shoveling leaves out of there and then came across a layer that had been in there so long that it decayed to dirt and got it out of there
Is there
and then
anything living in
encountered, not that I saw, and then encountered about 4 inches worth of water. None of which could drain out because the drain was so thoroughly blocked by all the stuff on top of it. So now it works again.
Do we need gutter guy out here to keep the leaves out?
He was saying that, and I'm going, cha-ching.
I think we just need to avoid cleaning the gut or not cleaning the gutter out on a yearly basis.
Oh,
Once a
wow.
decade's probably a little too long.
Or 40 years.
More.
Or,
Yeah.
Well, Roger did it last time, and he said it was about 10 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
All right. So, how do you react to the statement that the gathered assembly is the primary symbol of Jesus in the room? Have you thought of the people in worship this way before?
I hadn't.
Yeah.
No. Not until I read this and I went,
Yeah.
I think I've always thought that. That he is in each one of us.
Right.
right.
I guess one of the things that I worry about sometimes is that people assign significance to things, whether they need to or not. So, like, people assign significance to that sanctuary lamp. You know, it burns forever in the name of Christ or whatever you believe, right? But it doesn't actually mean anything. It's just a tradition that somebody thought was a good idea and it caught on. You know, the vestments that I wear, like the robe, the alb, you know, come from a time in civilization in which everybody would have been wearing some robe of some type. So it wasn't an uncommon thing. And the reason it was white was to try to, you know, symbolize that purity that you had through Christ, right? So even newly baptized people were given white robes. I'm not sure that communicates 100% nowadays. And we have pushed back against that a little bit by saying, you know, the biggest reason that our pastors still wear robes is because it covers up the day-to-day clothing and shows that clothing of Christ where it's not about you anymore, it's about you ministering with the whole people of God, right? But you're still going to have people who aren't familiar with Lutheran tradition who see that robe and think that you're some kind of special person, okay? And I'm not. It's just
Yes,
the
you are.
truth.
You're here.
Well, no, I mean, it's just the truth. I'm no more qualified than anybody else to lead worship. Anybody can lead worship. The only thing you can't do is, technically the only thing you can't do is give communion. Because you can baptize in case of an emergency. But that's another Bible study.
We can't marry.
Well, that's a state thing. That's not
Right.
it's
Oh,
not
okay.
a
That's
church
not
thing.
a church thing. Oh, okay.
The church partners with the state to
Okay. Did not know that.
yeah, because it's different in the Catholic Church, but in the Lutheran Church it's not a sacrament. So
Okay.
because we define a sacrament as anything that is commanded explicitly by God. And so the only thing that managed to make its way through was communion and baptism. So, although Luther did argue for confession, but it got taken out later.
Tell you some of the priests that heard my confessions.
I mean, we do have if you look in the hymnal, there's a
There
right
is.
for individual confession.
Yeah.
And I have done it with people before, because sometimes it's a helpful thing to do.
It's called
But-
counseling.
Yeah.
Did you confess with your fingers crossed? My girl,
No, one was, you went
my
to the
girlfriend,
Irish
that's what
priest.
she would say. If I
Oh,
really
my
did something bad, I didn't want the priest to know. I'd hold my hand and cross my fingers.
No, I
But
go to the Irish priest, Father O'Brien, bless his soul. He had had a little bit before he came into the confessional, so you got the same thing. I knew exactly what I had. It didn't matter what. I could tell him I murdered somebody, I would have gotten the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, that was part of Luther's crisis, was that he felt like it didn't matter how much he confessed, he could never get it all out. He was annoying his confessor pastor because he kept coming up with new things and like waking him up in the dead of night to tell him new sins that he remembered. And the guy was like, "Go away." So,
Here's some indulgences.
yeah, for real.
And you know, in
No
the
charge.
olden days, older than me, my mother said we had to sit in a circle and confess. You went around. You didn't even get to go into a confessional. Everybody
Oh,
heard what
was
you
it?
had to say.
Bet there was a lot of lying going on.
Yeah. That's why we
I
moved
confess
to.
my lie
That's why we
first.
moved to corporate confession of forgiveness.
Yes.
Yeah, the
It ain't
brief
nobody's
order.
business but me and his.
That's right.
Absolutely.
All right. In your worship setting, are the people gathered for worship actors or audience? How does the physical worship space contribute to that perception or identity? I'm interested to hear these answers.
Well, I mean, we have, like, people
Both.
that read the gospel, I think our Lutherans do a good job of involving.
Yeah. But
Um,
even amongst us, there's variations. So, like, there's a list of people here who are readers. At St. Michael, that is not the case. There are two people who
Oh, I noticed that.
are assistant ministers,
Uh-huh.
and they do the readings. And it used to be that there were more people who did assisting ministry, but it just got to the point where they were the only two left able to do.
So,
I used
if
to
they
be
were both
assistant
to get
minister.
sick, what would happen?
I
Then
fly
would you
solo.
open it up to?
I usually fly solo. Just because if I ask anybody to say anything in church, they look at me like I've asked them to commit 14 homicides and a bank robbery.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah, I like to read, and I love to do
I
assistant
know.
pastor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we had, yeah.
And
So I was-
choir.
Well, we're
Yeah.
working on that. If COVID will ever go away.
Yeah, Jacqueline wants to Start a choir back up.
Anybody wants to hear me frog it?
I didn't mean to cut you off. Though.
No, that's just kind of where I was. I think
Yeah.
we do it.
Well,
You
I
know.
think we're both
Yes.
Yeah.
actors and audience.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we do a better job than some of encouraging lay participation. But like one of the reasons that I have personally wanted and taken on the task of knocking down that brick stub wall in that sanctuary is because it separates me from y'all. It
Oh,
never,
you didn't.
yeah,
Mhm.
it never should have been built.
Right.
We talked about that.
Well, I liked it because it kind of hid, especially when the Christmas tree was up.
Yeah,
Is mine.
The choir back there. It had the choir.
the
yeah.
choir would do all kinds of things.
Oh,
I've heard
Roger.
those stories.
Roger, yeah, he.
Oh, Roger and
But that-
what's his name?
John.
John.
Like I can show you the email or not emails. It was way too early for emails. The letters back and forth between the architect who designed the building
Mm-hmm.
and the LCA's architect in New York, and they kept telling the architect down here, do not put in that brick stub wall. It does not meet Lutheran theology. It creates a division between the front of the church and the rest of the church, and it makes it look like that's a stage for only certain people.
It was.
Well, it was. Wasn't
Well,
it?
in that case, it reflected his theology.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right.
Which
I mean,
was
now I
Baptist.
realize that, but I didn't look at it like that at the
He
time.
was raised
because
a
I
Southern
came from the
Baptist.
I didn't know
storefront
that.
we had, where we didn't have any of that, so that we moved into the building.
Yep. He was raised a Southern Baptist.
Ah,
And the biggest reason we ever even looked at taking that wall down is because one of the sides had a crack in it, and it was I went over there and pulled on it a little bit, and I was like, oh,
Oh, what a shame.
What a shame.
didn't mean that to happen.
now you get something else to confess.
Yeah, sure. I'll call my local Catholic priest. You know, a lot of times our sanctuaries are set up to create this audience versus actors appearance. You know, we talked, I think, a little last time about how the pulpit is supposed to be that one central place where everybody goes up to. It's not a special place for the pastor. I brought that up at St. Michael, and they're like, "Oh, no, we don't go there." It's like, y'all, you won't. It's not the holy of holies. I'm not going to need to tie a rope to you in case you get smited. Okay, it's just a little elevated platform.
There's a lot of older Lutheran churches you go into that.
Ours was, pulpit was raised, you went up about, I don't know, 6, 8 steps maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah, the one I
Yeah,
grew
like-
up in was.
Saint John downtown is like that, and
Yeah.
I have a lot of issues with St. John. Not St. John himself, but St. John the Lutheran Church and its pastor. Because I was one of their seminarian scholarship recipients 2 years, but not 3 years, because I made some of my opinions known at the second one after I just had enough, and they didn't ask me to come back. It was all right. I survived. But yeah, Pastor Butler there, he thinks he is God's gift to the ministry, and he thinks he like,
No, I hear somebody.
and it's probably Paul. But he thinks he's God's gift to the ministry, and he thinks that everybody should know that. And like there are all kind of rules you have to know. Like he literally, my daughter was used to communing. He literally held the paten back behind his back because she was trying to grab a wafer to bless her instead of giving her a wafer.
That's when my son got married.
When-
So I knew all the,
Yeah.
there's a lot of rules there.
Like when they share the peace, they don't go anywhere. They don't touch anybody. They just turn around and look at each other and say, "Peace be
Peace.
with you," and that's it. And they sit back down.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well that's the first time I went. I've turned around, ready to shake him. Okay.
Keep your hands to yourself.
It's the Lord be with me then.
Did you shower that morning?
Well, I was clean and everything. All right.
I'm learning a lot. I really am learning a lot.
Do you think it makes a difference in the time frame? Things were so different when I
yes.
grew up compared to now. Like now, I had a hard time the first time I saw a child take communion because we had to go through confirmation.
Right.
Right. I was shocked, to be truthful with you.
Yeah, and we had to be, I don't know, maybe 12 in order to
Right.
go
I think it was 12,
confirmation.
Yeah.
So
And now,
when I had First Communion, I went through that way.
uh-huh.
Okay, so I had to go through all the not
Catechism.
just the confirmation classes, but we also had special additional classes on communion and what you were doing and how you were doing and the whole 9 yards, right?
We could be examined by the whole congregation.
Yeah.
The whole congregation was invited, and we sat up there, and they could ask us questions.
Oh my Lord.
Talk about being
I would have
scared.
failed. I would have failed on that one. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there were some people when I was at Messiah who wanted to bring that back, and I was the person in charge of youth, and I was like, no,
No.
No, they won't.
there is no way. We
Probably
will
why
just
there are not
cancel
many young
confirmation
people.
classes for the year I'm here. I can't influence it after I leave, but I can influence it for this year.
We'll never get young people back in the
Right.
church.
No. I was in the camp of needing people to go through all the classes to try to understand, right? But then as I went through seminary, I really started thinking about it, does anybody really understand? Okay, we confess that Christ is in, with, and under the elements through some mystical union that cannot be explained. That wafer now becomes linked to Christ's flesh, and that blood, or that wine now becomes linked to Christ's blood, and that it's the real flesh and blood, but it's also real bread and wine, and it's enough to make your head explode.
Right.
Okay? But what really convinced me was Rosie had, against my wishes, started letting Lexi commune when we were at Pisgah. And I couldn't stop it because what was I going to do? Get up and make a scene? But she had started doing that. And then one day we had a guest pastor because the regular pastor was on vacation. And she didn't know Lexi communed, so she gave her blessing and kept going. And Lexi left the table in tears. And she kept repeating over and over again. It wasn't that she didn't get something she wanted. She kept saying, "Mommy, she didn't give me Jesus." I was like, well, if she understands that well, then she understands well enough.
Yeah.
Right.
There's an importance to passing on knowledge of the faith. Okay? But we should not put a price on God's grace. Okay, God gives that communion freely to all of us. And if we're saying, well, the only way you can get admitted to that is if you do this, this, and this, then we're putting conditions on God's grace. And so that's why a lot of churches have started communing children.
Why? Now when I think about it, because we made our first Holy Communion when we were 7.
Right.
So why didn't that continue on with Luther when?
It wasn't that Luther didn't want to do that. Luther actually did commune children. He wrote about it in some of his writings. But later, Lutheranism went through a period about 100 years after Luther and the other early reformers died, called Lutheran Orthodoxy. And it's when these really, really intelligent theological scholars got a hold of Lutheranism and created all this additional commentary and these additional ideas and traditions and all this stuff. People like Johann Gerhard and a whole bunch of others, right? And what they produced was very similar to what Thomas Aquinas produced for the Catholic Church during its period of orthodoxy, right? when Lutheranism got to North America, it had to deal with the fact that they couldn't observe all these traditions because they just didn't have the resources. So it became really important to just educate. That's why you see education ministries. That's why you see this high importance on confirmation and first communion classes and everything. And yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I agree. There was something special to having that first communion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember writing to all my relatives up in Illinois that I never met and never spoke a word to ever again, to let them know I was about to have first communion, and they just sent money.
Exactly.
And it was great. And I was like, if I had known this was out there, like, I'm about to have my first baptism. Here, send more money. But
I know. I had my grandchildren up north send me when they were making their
Yeah.
First Holy Communion and then their confirmation. And
Yeah.
I thought,
Yeah.
well, that's very nice. I'm glad you did.
they sent me money for first communion and confirmation, and then like I was excited when I graduated high school because I was like, it's gonna happen again. I didn't give a crap about that. Like, wow, you got a high school diploma, congratulations. You know?
Well, now you see what was most important.
Yeah, get a Master of Divinity or something and we'll talk. Well, I did, and now they're all,
dead.
that took too long. All right. So the cross in our community, how does it serve? How many crosses are in your worship space? Do any of them move with the people? That kind of thing.
Well,
I like it.
depending.
Yeah.
I like what
We
we're
have-
doing now.
One, and then we've got the
Yeah.
the crucifix. The
Yeah.
crucifix
Yeah,
cross.
if you can find enough people to have a procession and
Right.
everything, yeah. And we actually have 2 processional crosses, which is
Well, we went through an ordeal about that.
Yes, we did.
you'll
Trying
have
to find one light enough for a child to
It
carry.
was just too heavy. I mean,
Yeah.
I could. I don't know
Yeah.
how y'all did it.
And of course, we have the big cross in the sanctuary, but there's more crosses than that in the sanctuary.
There it is.
You never noticed?
No.
Go look at the side of the pews.
Oh,
That's right, I did. And you now that he says that, I
Yes.
did. I thought, oh, I never noticed that before. 'Cause
With
yeah.
the pews, there are 44 crosses.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
One
You
on
never-
each end of the pew.
Now that you say that, but I just didn't.
Yeah.
we were, I think
Right,
Well,
and because it becomes so normal to
You
see
don't
it,
see it.
you
It
don't
did,
see
yeah.
it.
Right.
I think we were in the sanctuary. You explained something, and I haven't. I thought, well, I never noticed that before. I mean, years and years. I never noticed
Yeah.
it.
And then as far as crosses in the community, I mean, people see a cross, they think Christian now, right?
Right.
Yep.
1,000 years ago, that's not what you would have
Right.
thought.
Right.
You would have seen a cross and like, oh, somebody's going to be
die?
executed.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we've got one on the front of the church.
And one on this side, and one on this side, and one on the inside, and we have enough crosses to protect us from the baddest vampire.
Okay.
So we're good there.
Maybe
Um,
we need to plant some garlic.
Right.
And probably attract the mosquitoes.
Well, he loved me.
Yeah, I mean, even in our church logo, there's a cross.
There's another one.
Yeah. Sunday school rooms.
On
Right.
the board.
One on the board.
So you know, it's kind of a ubiquitous symbol to it. Oh yeah, they're all over the
Every-
hymnals.
Yeah.
Every hymnal has them except the SBH. Yeah. So.
It's making me be more observant, if
Mhm.
nothing else, reading this.
Well,
I
that-
found it fascinating.
And that's
Mhm.
that's kind of the point. It's getting
Yeah.
you to start thinking about things. So identify recent efforts or potential opportunities to teach the symbolic vocabulary of the church to members of your community. Well, there's this Bible study, and that's about it. We haven't really communicated that symbolic language because everyone has been here or been in a church for so long that sometimes it's not necessary. It's good to have a refresher from time to time,
Right.
but
Right.
sometimes, you know, sometimes some of what I'm going to try to teach y'all is stuff that you have known for years. You know, like, we knew this before you were born. So,
Well, and a lot of times too, you knew this years ago. You were taught in catechism class and
Right.
in confirmation,
Mm-hmm.
but it's way back there.
Right.
All the passwords have buried it.
Right. But I don't think that we were taught it. I think we memorized it. Because just reading what I've read, it's like, I didn't know that. I didn't, I just, anyway,
Well-
I found it to be,
Yeah, I did know that,
but yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
Well, or you knew it, but I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it makes it all come back.
Mhm.
And then they were talking about symbols and what was it? Symbols and
signs and
Signs.
symbols.
Signs and symbols.
Yeah.
Signs.
So, the next question is about when have you had a time when a symbol for you was offensive to someone else, and the thing that comes to my mind when I see that is you'll see a lot of people driving around town with that or that yellow sticker that says "Don't tread on me" and it's got the snake.
Snake, right?
They do that without understanding what it was. Okay, that was a flag that was used in the earliest of the United States Navy. It was the original
Yeah.
Navy Union Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it did not symbolize this hyper partisan idea of patriotism that we develop now. It simply symbolized this is a United States ship. Don't mess with it
Right.
because it's going to create a problem. Now, when we were flying that flag, we didn't have enough ships in the United States Navy for anybody to see
Right.
or to mess with. And even when we did, they still didn't take us seriously, like the Barbary pirates and stuff like that. Or the British in 1812. But it's something that has an ascribed meaning to someone else, but it bugs the mess out of me because I know what its original meaning is, and I know that by and large they don't. You'll also see this among people who fly that police flag, the one that's got
the
it looks
blue
like
line.
the blacked out, the
Yeah.
blue line, because it's the blacked out American flag with the blue line. You know, it has a deep meaning to them, but for some people, it's offensive just because they have done something to change the American flag, which you're not supposed to do.
Right.
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 Now, one thing that tears Don up is people wearing the American flag.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
He gets so aggravated when he sees people in shorts and things with the American flag.
Yeah, I'm with him on that.
Yeah.
What about the symbol of the fish and the cross that are on cars?
So the fish is an early symbol
Right,
of Christianity.
right.
Believers. If you wanted to know if somebody was a believer, you would make the mark in the sand.
Correct,
And if
and
they
would
finished
complete
it,
yeah.
then you knew, and if they didn't, you walked away. So I mean, it's fine to have that symbolism, but if we don't ever explain it to people, then they just wonder why we have a fish on the back of our car.
Exactly. Or they're the worst.
The one that bugs
Offensive
me
ones.
is the fish with the legs.
Fish with
I haven't
legs.
seen that
No,
one.
Me neither.
You don't. You've never seen that?
No. What the one that gets me though is the people who have the like the cross in the back of their car, and they are the ones who cut you off in traffic
right.
or flip you
I'm
off
right there
or
with you.
ride your tail, and it's like
Blow their
the
horn at
Lord
you.
be with you.
Yes.
Bless your heart. And then there's always like when I was in middle school. Okay, this is late '90s. Yes, I know. don't go there. But it was like this big thing to wear the WWJD bracelets.
Right,
What would
right.
Jesus do?
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And the older that I've gotten, the more I think back on those bracelets, it's like, that doesn't make any sense. It's not about what would Jesus do. Like, what would Jesus tell you to do?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, and it's like, feed the hungry, clothe the poor. These are pretty standard rules. He kind of laid it out in 4 Gospels in case you missed it.
Right.
You get it 4 times just so you really remember it. So,
That was an evolution. It represented evolution, the fish with the legs.
okay. Yeah, and we can have
The whole,
theological
yeah, we
conversations about evolution. Um,
That would be.
That'll be another Bible study.
No, I did have
That would be a long one.
a incident when I was working, and I always wear a cross. I just don't feel dressed unless I've got my cross. And I was at work, and this girl was a Jehovah's Witness or Seventh Day Adventist. She goes, "Why do you always wear that?" And I said, "What?" "Well, that thing on your neck." I said, "My cross?" "Yeah." "Would you wear a gun around your neck?" I said, "Because it's a symbol of, Jesus dying on the cross." "Would you wear a gun around your neck if somebody killed your son with a gun?"
So how do you answer that? Oh, I can
I
imagine.
don't
No.
There's
No,
no-
I don't want him to think you.
I just got up and walked away.
Clean up what you said.
There's no way.
all right, so it's a little bit after 6:30, so we need to leave it here because
Okay.
we got a property team meeting that's
Okay.
about to start. So why don't we pray as we go out here? The Lord be with you.
Also,
Also,
Gracious God, we thank you for opening your word to us this night and helping us to understand a little bit more about our faith and about what our church says about our belief in you. We ask that you continue to help us as we go through the study to hear more things that we did not know so that we can become better followers of you. And we ask you to continue to send us out in this life as disciples of you, proclaiming you to all we meet in our words and actions. We pray all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Chapter 3.
Yes, chapter 3 for next week, please.
So how was your big day?
It was okay. Right at the end, we had somebody pass away over at St. Michael.
Oh,
no, I still don't know.
Was that person sick for a while?